At this point, water may be reabsorbed in response to two separate hormones. This time we have to have aquaporin channels inserted by ADH, or you might notice there's old friend aldosterone again. Aldosterone helps us to reabsorb water if it's coupled with what? Sodium. Good. Let's take a moment on ADH there because that's an old review from chapter 16. ADH is anti-diuretic hormone. We are against the formation of urine. So water that's currently present in your DCT that may need to be reabsorbed back into the bloodstream can only do so if ADH inserts aquaporins into the DCT. Under what conditions might you want to reclaim that excess water? Yes, dehydrated, low blood pressure. So what's left traveling through the DCT and the collecting duct will likely form dark yellow concentrated urine. Most of that water is going to be sent back into the bloodstream to maintain proper hydration or blood pressure. So you'll want to highlight or underline the little word under the notes column called facultative water reabsorption. Facultative means that we only do it if we need it, and we need assistance with it as well. This is not just automatic water reabsorption. This is water reabsorption that's assisted by the ADH hormone and the placement of those aquaporin channels. Again, look at caffeine and Lasix. Not only do they inhibit the sodium channels that aldosterone is placing in that DCT, but caffeine and Lasix also inhibit those aquaporin water channels placed there by ADH. So caffeine and Lasix both can stop sodium and water reabsorption from taking place, and they're, of course, how they're effective as making us lose blood volume. I did want to mention glucose to you. What's the magic number that we can reabsorb?
180.
180. Good. That's the filtration, the reabsorption max. So if you're beyond 180 units of glucose, then that essentially is traveling now through your loop, through your DCT. Glucose attracts water to it just like salt attracts water to it. So if you have a high number of glucose molecules sitting here in your DCT, that water is going to be more attracted to stay with the glucose and less interested in coming back into the bloodstream. This is the basis for why diabetics actually lose so much water in their urine, because the excess glucose that cannot be reabsorbed back in the bloodstream attracts water to stay here in the DCT. So here you go. This is the polyuria portion of any kind of diabetes, especially the diabetes mellitus. The diabetes insipidus is not the sugar problem, but rather the aquaporin problem that we're not able to reclaim that water back into the bloodstream. So if you happen to have a really sugary meal, let's say you went to Krispy Kreme, got yourself some donuts, and had a liter of Coke with it, boy, you're above 180, aren't you? 180 units of glucose can be reabsorbed per volume of plasma. Any excess traveling through your DCT will pull water out with it as well. So if you have a really sugary meal, you may have a temporary case of glucosuria. Along with that goes a case of polyuria. So excess urination will tend to follow when you have excess glucose sitting there in that DCT. I want you to notice the term there, by glucose. What's that? If you have something really sugary, makes you pee. Yeah, sugar will make you dehydrate a little bit there. Notice by the word glucose it says osmotic diuretic. Okay, that's a special term to know because not everything does this particular job. What does osmosis typically do? Yes, reabsorb or move water around, right? So in this case, glucose is actually attracting water, not for reabsorption, but for removal in the urine. So glucose can actually be a bad thing for somebody who's trying to retain fluid.
So that's going to raise your blood pressure?
If you lose the fluid, it's going to lower your blood pressure. Filtrate. Yes, if you've got more than 180 units of glucose sitting here in the DCT currently, Instead of the water getting reabsorbed through those aquaporin channels, water says, oh, I'm so excited, glucose is here with me, I'm staying with glucose, and I'm going to leave the body in the urine, so you lose that water and that glucose. So it actually acts to dehydrate you.
So, like the people that drink the drinks that are made with Red Bull and alcohol and, you know, they've got the sugar, the caffeine, the alcohol.
Right.
They're really putting their body in a world of hurt.
Yeah, you're just peeing it all away, yeah, because it dehydrates the heck out of you. Yeah, and there comes the hot mouth and the headache and all that good stuff. This is actually the basis for why, you know, if someone has vomiting and diarrhea, we encourage you not to drink something like apple juice or something really sweet, because if you're already dehydrated and you drink something really sweet like apple juice because you have an upset stomach and you've had vomiting and diarrhea for days, that apple juice is sweet enough to exceed 180 units of glucose, so instead of you reclaiming those really necessary fluids, you pee them away. They're gone. So that's the unfortunate thing about drinking sweet fluids if you're currently dehydrated.
What's changed now that my doctor's telling me 130 is the cutoff for diabetes and your blood sugar?
There may be still 180 units that can reabsorb here, but maybe they're realizing that people that are closer to that tend to be pre-diabetic or you know, hovering around that insulin resistance type neighborhood. Yeah, so maybe they're saying that higher than 130 is a little dangerous. That's probably what it is.
Okay.
We can also reabsorb calcium, and here again is chapter 16 coming back to haunt you, or visit you, however the case may be. If you recall PTH and calcitriol from Bio 210. Okay, so PTH's job is to increase blood calcium levels. You probably think about PTH and think immediately of bones and osteoclasts, because that is one of their major jobs. But PTH can also take calcium from your bloodstream, move it from the DCT into the peritubular capillaries, and then of course reabsorb that back in the blood flow. So yet just one more way to reabsorb calcium and increase blood calcium levels. Okay. Something else that happens here in your DCT is a different process. Now, we haven't talked about secretion so far. This is not the very first place that secretion occurs, but it is one place that we're going to spend a little time talking. First, let me explain what secretion is. Everything we've done from the point of the PCT, your loop of Henle, and DCT has been taking items in the filtrate that we remove from your bloodstream and taking those items back into your blood flow. So we've called the process so far reabsorption because we're moving these items from the tubule into the peritubular capillaries so that that item can rejoin blood flow. This time we're going to flip-flop stuff just a little bit. You might recall that certain things were perhaps not filtered out as traveled through the glomerulus, went through the efferent arteriole. Efferent arteriole ultimately hooks up with your peritubular capillaries. You'll see how the peritubular capillaries really crisscross and wrap this entire tubule system. There are certain conditions that may make it necessary for those items in the bloodstream to now go into the tubule. How does that compare to the process of reabsorption?
It's going the other direction.
It's going the other direction and you're taking it out. So certain items are hopping back into the bloodstream, which is absolutely reabsorption. But now we're talking about secretion, which is taking items in the bloodstream and moving it into the tubule. So kind of interesting here that certain items may actually be secreted to be removed in our urine, rather than, you know, left in the bloodstream for traveling around our systemic flow. All right, so secretion can occur, like I mentioned to you, anywhere along the way, PCT, DCT, even a collecting duct, we can secrete items for removal out of our urine. These are items that the body doesn't need, and we're all about maintaining blood pH balance, blood fluid balance. So anything that might